today. Breaking news.
Today I'm going to do a review. It's long overdue. It's the SVS PB16 Ultra, and in that time I've had the Arendal 1723 2V subwoofer. These two go head to head, I think, in the market, and today I'm going to do a review on that. I think the standout feature for the SVS is the driver technology. Personally, compared to everything else, I think it's far ahead. It weighs 30 kilograms, it's 15-16 inches. It's made from a very stiff composite that's like hard, like plasterboard. It is really that stiff and strong. And I think that this driver specifically has been developed to handle the sub bass, the lowest sub bass below 40 Hertz, and that's why it's such a stiff driver. Whereas Arendal's standout feature is the fact that it's a dual opposing design as well. Each driver is 13.8 inches, and I believe the power handling is 1200 watts, so you'd assume 600 watts each side. You could argue perhaps it's a lighter driver, therefore you might expect it's more suited to bass frequencies higher up rather than the lowest sub bass, 20 Hertz or whatever. Obviously at this point it is just speculation when you look at the spec sheet. Arendal, I think it has a more modern, fresh look compared to the SVS designs. It's either gloss black, gloss white, or I think matte white and black as well. There's no wood finishes at all. I think the SVS, by comparison, is a little bit more traditional in its design, a bit more man cave, you could argue. Big woofer at the front, big ports at the front. Also, the SVS is a bit shorter, but it's wider and deeper than the Arendal. So, funnily enough, I find even though the SVS was actually bigger in volume, in my room it seemed like it stood out less. And that's because I think the height of the subwoofer is lower than the armrest of my couch. Whereas the Arendal, because it's a bit taller than the SVS, it kind of towers above my couch, and for me it just felt like it stood out a little bit more, and it was white gloss as well, so that didn't help things.
And it looked a bit like a washing machine.
Yeah, and it also looked a bit like a washing machine as well. SVS, they take a different approach to Arendal with the ports. SVS give you 3 ports and you can adjust, you can put the foam bung in either of the ports and you can get a slightly different acoustic property from the sub. Whereas with the Arendal, you just have either plugged or unplugged, and it's a slotted port at the back. For me, I found the SVS PB16 Ultra sounded better in the corner of my room, one of the corners, and the Arendal didn't sound good at all in that corner. For some reason, it was just dead, like acoustically dead, like something was being cancelled out, some frequency was being cancelled out. And yeah, it lacked bass response. I found the Arendal sounded better at the front of the room, and that's where I tested these subs, where I believe the optimal listening position was for each. I tested a variety of music, movies, frequency sweeps, etc. I also calibrated both subwoofers the same way using a calibration microphone, using the AV amp that I have, which is a Yamaha Avantage. It's a very, very important thing to have a very good bass response between 20 Hertz and 40 Hertz in movies. That's the region that really comes alive, I think, with movies when compared to music, which is pretty much dead in that sort of area by comparison. I felt that the SVS was a bit more of a natural when it came to delivering that feeling of being immersed in a movie. One thing that comes to mind is the interstellar wormhole scene. You know, for the SVS, it just sounded a little bit more effortless than the Arendal. I mean, both were, at reference levels, of course, but for me, the SVS just sounded a bit cleaner in that region, and the couch was shaking a lot more with the SVS. I don't know if that's a measurement that you actually care about, but that's what I noticed. For For the next part of this test, I'm going to talk about the infrasonic range specifically. For those of you who don't know, infrasonics is the area, let's say, of the frequency spectrum that's below your audible hearing, and people tend to stop hearing around 20 hertz, something like that. Below that, you pretty much feel the bass, but you can't actually hear any frequency, like the note, for example. It doesn't register in your brain. I tested both of these subwoofers in that region, and I can tell you that there is some infrasonic performance on tap. The SVS is better than the Arendal. I mean louder, or not louder, but I don't know what to even say. It's just, it shakes the room more. How about that? Between 15 to 20 hertz, it seems a bit more powerful, quite a bit more. Below 15 hertz, it tapers off and basically becomes nothing by 10 hertz. The same can be said for the Arendal as well, but below 15 hertz, there's barely anything there. Even though the measurements say otherwise, I didn't see that from the position it was in my room. Port chuffing is obviously going to happen with a ported sub when it's banging out as much air as possible. And I think the Arendal maybe is a little bit, less audible, but it's still audible. The SVS is a little bit more violent with its chuffing. I found this specifically in the extended mode of the SVS. However, if you take out that port bung, is that the word bung? The foam bung. Yeah. However, if you take out that port plug, then the chuffing pretty much goes away because the subwoofer is not actually outputting much in that region anyway. What do I think? I think infrasonics, it's not really that important. It is quite important for some people, but when you're hearing chuffing, because you can't hear any actual physical, like real bass in that region, all you're hearing is the chuffing and room shake. So I don't really feel like it's an authentic experience. If you really want infrasonics, I think you've got to go sealed, and you've got to get a large diameter driver, and probably many of them. Something like a bit more of an enthusiast brain, like a JTR Captivator, or there's another brand, Power Sound Audio. They do 18-inch, 21-inch, some of them with dual cones as well. And I think that's really going to give you much better infrasonic performance. I wouldn't be buying the SVS or the Arendal based on their infrasonic performances. I think with music it's a lot closer. It depends a lot on your crossover and the speakers you're partnering it to. For example, if you have a very large set of speakers, like the ones I have, KEF R900s, so they're multi-driver, they're 8-inch cones, they can handle themselves pretty much very cleanly down to 40 hertz very easily. So with that sort of speaker with music, I'm going to be crossing it over as low as possible, maybe even at 30 hertz. Or maybe even 35, something like that, I'm going to cross over with KEF R900s. But if you're going to cross over with something like, I don't know, Wharfdale Diamonds or something like that, you're going to need a much higher crossover for something like a 5 or 6 inch driver. Maybe in that department, I would say the Arendal would be a better choice, because I feel the Arendal comes into its stride above 40 hertz, and I feel like it's clearer and easy to pick out notes, I think, in that sort of region compared to the SVS. But the margins are very small. Like, I don't really feel like it would put me off either of them. Both of them sound good. The SVS still sounds good. Now, I use the data that I can see on the Audioholics website. The reason I do that is because I could take measurements in this house, but Audioholics do a much better test than what I can do. They take the subwoofers outside with no boundary interference. They have better equipment than I do, so surely that data is more reliable than what I could give you anyway. So that's what I'm going to be quoting from today. Check them out, by the way. Great website and a great channel. Now the burst test, it tells us basically how loud can the subwoofer go, basically. How much sound pressure can it output at what distortion as well for a split second, whatever it is. What I've managed to conclude from this data, I think, is that the SVS seems to handle the lowest frequencies better than the Arendal, which means higher sound output and lower distortion. Highlighted in green is the extended mode of the SVS, so those are those numbers specifically, and we're seeing that there's reference sound output there, and with single digit distortion as well, which is pretty incredible for a peak test, and we're getting that at 16 Hertz. Okay, in the standard mode, which I've highlighted in blue, the sound output goes up about 1 decibel across the range, but distortion comes down a little bit, and we lose about 9 decibels at 16 Hertz. So you really have to kind of pick which, what you want to trade off. Either do you want a lot more 16 Hertz performance, or do you want slightly better performance from 20 Hertz and up? For me, it's important to realise that the standard and extended mode both look like reference subwoofers to me. The peaks are clearly above 115 decibels, which I believe is a standard that's set by THX. Now, if we look at the Arendal by comparison, we're seeing a little bit more harmonic distortion that creeps in the lowest frequency range, between about 20 Hertz. And I think it's about 6 to 7 decibels behind the SVS in this region. The Arendal comes into its stride a little bit more above 40 Hertz, and at this level, I think the SVS and Arendal are more evenly matched, but you might expect that, as I mentioned before, because the Arendal's cones are lighter, smaller diameter drivers, perhaps it's better suited to higher octaves compared to the PB16's driver. I think maybe it's a little bit of a oversimplification, but you could say that group delay lends itself to that feeling of tight bass. Now, the Arendal looks superior on paper. From 40 Hertz onwards, group delay is kept under 10 milliseconds. So for this, we want the lowest group delay possible, so lower numbers are better. The SVS manages to keep group delay under 10 milliseconds as well, but it only occurs from 50 to 60 Hertz upwards. I think the main thing is, like most people I think would agree, that the subwoofers should keep their group delay below 1 cycle or 1.5 cycles for most of the audio range. And if you can do that, most would argue that you probably won't even hear the difference. Another thing that I've heard is if the subwoofer can keep its group delay below 20 milliseconds at pretty much all frequencies, then there should be nothing to worry about. And from the graph, you can see that both subs are achieving this. At the end of the day, this is just a basic frequency sort of test. Maybe in the real world, those lower group delay figures will actually matter for some people. I'm not sure. But from what I could hear in my room, the Arendal was like, it sounded just a little bit clearer in the 40, 50, 60 Hertz range. You can just hear that the bass in that range was of a different quality, perhaps, to the SVS. But I think the margins are very, very small. To keep things fair, I don't want to say that one subwoofer is clearly better than the other, and I don't think you can really achieve that in the real world, especially with subwoofers, where we don't have ideal test conditions. I think it's a little bit like cars, like just because one car is faster from 0 to 60 than another car, it doesn't mean it's the better overall car in every race. It's just better in a drag race, for example. I would say, on the other hand, that there is one subwoofer out of the two that I would buy, and that would be the SVS. My money would be going on the SVS. And I'll tell you that the reason why, because I think that it's great for its size. It's a single driver configuration. The driver technology, for me, it's just complete eye candy for me. For someone with my interest, I just think it's, the super high excursion, 20 to 40 Hertz, the output that you get in that region, for me, it's just something phenomenal. And that SVS, it beats multi-driver subwoofers like the Arendal, and I think it's pretty much toe-to-toe with the one from Monolith, the 15-inch dual cone one from Monolith. How can that one driver output so much? I mean, for me, I just think it's a marvel, and I'm looking forward to the next iteration of it. But it's not just that. I think also the SVS, in my living room, I think it looked better. It didn't tower above the couch. It doesn't look like a washing machine. I got the black ash finish. I like the wood grain effect. I don't like finishes that are always you know, just black and white. I like something a little bit different. If there's some sort of wood in it, I prefer it. The other thing is the SVS, it worked better in my room in the corner, which I wanted to occupy with a subwoofer. The Arendal didn't work very well in that corner, so that's another reason I would pick the SVS. However, the Arendal does have some very good strengths, and I think, well, first of all, it's the price. It's about 30 to 40% lower in price in the UK, so I think that's a big thing. And secondly, the design. I know a lot of people are going to prefer the Arendal's design because it looks modern, it looks fresh. You know, it depends on your room. You know, if you have the sort of room for that, I think it's going to look stunning. So yeah, with music, you could say the Arendal is arguably a bit better than the SVS, a bit more suited to music. And you might argue it's a better all-rounder because, you know, it's good at the music, it's good at the movies, but you could say that about the SVS too. But I would say with the Arendal, because it costs less, it looks good, it's good at music, it's good at movies, it's probably a better, slightly better all-rounder than the SVS. If we're comparing these subwoofers to steaks, I would say the SVS is more like a juicy ribeye. Arendal is a bit more like a fillet steak. So which steak would you go for? Make the same choice with a subwoofer. If we're comparing to bodybuilders, I would say the SVS is more Ronnie Coleman. I believe the Arendal is a bit more Frank Zane. I would say the SVS is more like a Hulk and the Arendal is more like a Thor. So if you want, I don't know, some Norse god, go for the Arendal. Bit fitting as well, because the Arendal does come from Norway, I believe. Yeah. So that's the... it's just embarrassing. That's the end of the video. Subscribe to my channel if you want. Thumbs up, leave me a comment. Got any questions, let me know and I'll get back to you. That's it today from MDT. I'll see you in the next video.